Welcome. We would like you to start sharing at your tables as one way to get to know each other to get the session started. Share how, in your experience, in your organization where you work every day, how do people show up?
You have 4 minutes, go.
Sahota from Toronto, helping organizations shift with an increasingly humble stance.
This is Olaf Lewitz. He comes from Berlin. He's my best friend, and we collaborate on a lot of things and make beautiful organizational change and development together. Exactly. So we have so we want to start with why is this relevant? We want to make sure that everyone in the room is fully grounded about why we want to talk about reinventing organizations, and in particular, most of the material from this book, Reinventing Organizations. So if you weren't familiar with what the content of this talk is, now let me be clear. First of all, this is not just a talk, as you have already experienced, it's a mix of lightning talks, which is what we're entering into now, and workshops. So it's going to go back and forth. And what we're asking you to do is hold your questions for the large room until the end. So if you have questions, please use paper, notes, electronic devices, and write them down. What we do want to get to is do lightning talks, and then exercises, and then share group discussion questions for the end. Where we're going is a very important journey, just to sketch out the whole session, a really important journey of how are Olaf and I working with organizations to help them reinvent themselves, to help them find this problem to solve. How do we make actually Agile work for the enterprise? And that's where we're going. So, this is the Agile Manifesto. As Ella previously noticed, there's only one thing that really matters here, which is individual interactions. Or we've shortened it to just we value people. So we created the wholehearted manifesto to come up with a short version. A lot of you may have seen this, and it's just good to make sure we're on the same page, that Agile practices and doing Agile, the ceremonies, the activities, are different from the Agile mindset and being Agile. And that if we look at it this way, doing Agile is not being Agile, practices are not mindset, and that this stuff's great, the practice gives us maybe 20% benefit, and it's incredibly valuable. And I love that people are focused on this and doing this. This is really great for our community. And the part that really excites Olaf and I, and this is where we put our time and energy, is the being Agile, the mindset side. Things like customer delight, joy at work, where people come in with fire in their belly. So we want to talk about organizational culture. Like, organizational culture is this wibbly-wobbly thing in the middle of this diagram, right? And it's wibbly-wobbly because it's sort of hard to see, it's sort of invisible. And throughout this workshop, we'll give you a lens for looking at it so it becomes less invisible and more something you can point at and touch. And the important part here is that it touches people and structure, right? It ties everything together. And the big trap with things like Agile, people get confused and think, well, if we just change our process down here, we can fix things and make things better. So when we see that culture is the wibbly-wobbly thing that ties everything together, when we try to change this, everything else has to go with it. Otherwise, it just gets pulled this way, and then it'll just go back, right? And that's why a lot of process-only changes fail, because they can't change the culture. And the culture is like the big anchor of your organization. So the traditional...
May I add one sentence or two to this picture? Another reason why organizational change fails is that we don't see this thing in the middle, and very often we don't even dare to look at it. So we look at things on the side instead, and change these. So if we change the org chart, now everybody knows that the org chart is not showing the actual network of interactions in the organization, right? So we change that, and then we wonder why the actual interactions don't change. We change the process, and we wonder why the way people actually work doesn't change. Because we don't really dare to look at reality. We change the organization we would like to pretend we have. And that is a placeholder conversation, which sometimes is interesting, it's rarely leading to sustainable differences. Make sense?
Yes, great. So the traditional modern enterprise, we label it this way, with this very specific form of culture, this sort of structure, correct, rigid approach. Enterprise Agile, in my sense of it, is a very useful endeavor. It's about taking little bits of agility and sprinkling and injecting it within the overall structure of the organizational enterprise, right? So the overall assumptions, all the structures, all the policies, they're largely the same, and we're just trying to inject a little bit of Agile, whatever level of injection can be tolerated, right? That's kind of what I refer to the adoption of Agile practices. This is kind of like the more safe approach if you want to use that kind of language, and I don't mean to be pejorative or insult. What we're interested in, and this is where we think is what's needed for organizations for our survival as a species and for really succeeding in the world, is the Agile enterprise, which is this, this very flexible organism that it moves, and it's not like someone's in charge or in control of it. It's just evolving and adapting to the needs of the customers, the needs of the people who work there, the needs of the environment, and it's very adaptable, anti-fragile. This is the Agile enterprise, and this is what this session is about. It's about how do we get to and cultivate, move towards having an Agile enterprise. So, how do we get to an Agile enterprise? We're supposed to do something. What are we supposed to do?
Thing.
I think we have an exercise.
We have an exercise.
You must. We just like to talk. We do have an exercise.
Yes. You have cards on your table.
Okay.
Cards in different colors. The smaller ones, not the big A4 handout, but the smaller card.
So the instructions are break into 2 groups. We have 2 sets of cards for each table. Each set has 4 different cards in it. Now what we want you to do is break into 2 groups, and each group needs to decide and agree together and sort these from what is the most valuable system here to the least valuable. Okay? So we need to sort the cards into what do you think will lead to the highest levels of employee joy, employee productivity, and organizational results. From highest to lowest. Okay? 1, 2, 3, go.
That's a good descriptor.
This is like
fantastic. People are having a hard time getting back on this exercise. It's great. We'd love to see that. So let's debrief this with a large group. So let's start by getting the data. Let's get the data first. So put up your hand if your group had red or amber as what you thought was the most productive, the most valuable, successful way. What group? Okay. Not so much for red or amber. Okay. Put up your hand if you had orange as the most productive, successful way of work. Okay, another big zero. But if you're going to get green as the most successful, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sorry. If your group decided, could everyone in your group put up your hand just so you count effectively? So Olaf, can you start from that side of the room? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I got the middle. 15. 15? Okay. Put up your hand if you had teal as the most useful way.
You and I were
12? Okay. All right. So, what?
Which tables were you counting?
I don't know.
I would think it was 30 and 50.
Okay.
Michael, you just said it was 6. And
you know, I don't know what we're having here. It doesn't matter. I was counting the number of groups. He's going to be counting the number of people.
Yes.
Anyway, so it's really interesting, right? We're considering, well, what is actually a more productive way of working, right? What does the data show? What do the case studies show as a more valuable way of working, right? And what biases do we have coming into the session, right? So could some people share, like, tell me some reasons why you thought green was the most valuable way. Can people do some shares? Great.
I think we sort of went back and forth between what is your primary focus versus what is the valuable way you're trying to.
Oh, I see. Okay, so your focus is on green because that's how it leads to results. Okay, great. Thank you. Would someone else like to share? Please stand up and share. You can use a microphone or just speak loudly. Someone else?
I have to stand up too.
Yeah, it's really challenging, you know.
So we chose blue, but I was a dissenting opinion, and I liked green.
Very good.
And the reason for that was because in a green organization, you take care of your people. It's still an enlightened dictatorship, if you want to call it that. You still have your structure in place. But when you move to a teal organization, at least when you start, you become an organization that falls into anarchy that has to now self-organize. And during that process, people aren't taken care of because you're in charge of yourself. So in that space, it's not a friendly, fun thing to do.
Okay, great. So you're thinking the transition to teal might be very difficult. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Would someone else like to share about green? Why do you think green is the place to be? Great, please.
it's like what we say through the Agile manifesto. You said it yourself, people.
Yeah, people. That's where we come from. This is our tribe. And people are the most important thing. Sure, great. Well, someone else about green. Reason?
Yeah, so in this table we chose as a group the blue, but I also prefer to be green. And the reason is that I have seen in one of the clients, Southwest Airlines, where we're very people-centric and a lot of fun in doing Agile. So
Great,
that was my reason.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so can we have some people who were either their group decided on green and they were secret teal fans, or people who whose group actually decided on teal? Can we hear some shout outs to those people about what are the reasons you thought that teal would be more effective?
thought Teal would be good because it's a living organism. It's that entity of all the individuals. You're not disrespecting the individuals, but it's that focus and the work will get done versus, hey, I've got to take a time out or an issue. It's, well, we're going to continue on.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Please stand up.
I like the idea that in the team organization, every voice is heard, and with time, people, even the ones that haven't been taken care of, they find their own voice, and that's, I think, very important, because if I don't have one at a time.
Great, so so you feel in Teal University people can find their voice, and that's very, very powerful. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Someone else?
I think one of the key things about Teal is autonomy, and I'm very much a fan of getting things to work and drive, so I think it's the kind of environment that's going to provide the best business outcome and the most enjoyable work experience.
Beautiful, great. Can we take one more share about Teal? What someone was thinking?
I like Teal because of some of the experiences that we've had in our company. It's a very scary place to go. There's a lot of uncertainty. We have to push our boundaries. I've had to push a lot of my own and trusting that people are intelligent and think for themselves and can be innovative. But I've also realized that there's a paradox in thinking that we need enlightened leadership, and that when we ask people to come to work but only bring part of who they are, and we have them walk through the door but not bring their passions or their family or their spirituality or other elements of who they are, it's impossible to ask them to innovate. And it's impossible to get them to organize around a greater purpose, or for that purpose to even be aligned with their own personal purpose of where they see themselves in 20 years. How they're going to be fulfilled when they're on their deathbeds, that sort of thing. And I think it's a really relevant question to ask. When I've been interviewing people recently, I've started asking them, where do you see yourself in 20, 30 years? Where do you see yourself when you retire? And what's going to make you feel like you've been successful and purposeful in your life, and how does that align, rather than trying to find tension between personal purpose and organizational purpose, which at the end of the day means that we're not being true to either one.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. So that's a beautiful segue for Olaf and I to share our limited understanding of the different stages.
Yeah. So we are not going to go into too much detail. We don't want to take your fun away when you read the book. But I want to give you an overview of the different, I like to call them attractors in the complex space of human organizations, common patterns that we have used over time. Some have been more popular in different centuries than others. And the basic takeaway that Michael and I had when we read it and talked about it and talked with other people, and the main reason why reading this book felt so wow and so, this is why it never worked, or this is why it worked that time, was that Lalou gave some thinking tools and a lot of language to the things that we had observed, sometimes felt, in different situations in our organizational inspiring career, and some things where we had seen dissonances and tensions and things that didn't work together. And so it changed a lot of how we are thinking. What's important for me is that, as all models, this is wrong, right? So it's a simplification of reality, and these are not very distinct alternatives. In any real organization, you will find pockets of different patterns, and they can play together. So, for instance, your focus on people matches ours, and I don't think you can have a Teal organization where you don't take care of your people. The question is, how much patronization do you put into this taking care of people? Right? How much do you encourage them to take care for themselves? We do all grow up in societies that give us a lot of oppression and little responsibility for many, many, many aspects of our lives. So we don't learn to be free, right? And we need to take care that our organizations give that space so that people can move into whatever structures we want to have, right? Okay, so going back to tribal cultures a few thousand years back, the prominent organization of human beings, we don't know too much about that, so I'm not so sure about the historical accuracy. Centralized power, and power was limited by physical distance. I can only force Michael to do what I want if I am stronger and able to touch him. Or if I know somebody who's able to touch him. Right? So we do have a hierarchy, we do have some roles. With the Amber organization, which looking back from now is a very similar thing for many people who are distant. With the Amber organization, we got the org chart, so that somehow he could know, although I'm in Rome and the Pope and he's somewhere, right, that he still has to do what I say, even though he's never met me and I'm not able to exert physical power on him. The most prominent model that we have today, a prevalent model, is the orange one, the one that's oriented on results, where we have something like meritocracy, in contrast to an Amber organization where your position in the organization is basically determined by your birth or your education. It's not something that you can radically change or readily change through daily behavior. We do have accountability, so somebody gives a goal, I say yes, I'm going to achieve that goal by that date, management by objectives, that kind of thing. And we do have innovation. One quote by Frederick Lewitz, not actually true, is the Catholic Church doesn't have an R&D department. Right? So in an Amber organization, we don't have innovation. In an Orange organization, we have innovation and we deliberately move forward in certain ways. The kind of organization that most Agile people I know like most, and this is what we always wanted, is organization with values, organization with a purpose, where people come first, where the kind of metaphor for the kind of organization we would like to have is the perfect family, where everybody takes care of each other, and we achieve great things by working together. And the new idea, the pattern that Lalou found emerging by researching organizations that go beyond this model, is the level that he calls teal, where organizations have a decentralized network. That basically means you do not have centralized authority. Does not mean you don't have a hierarchy. You have lots of hierarchies. The hierarchy will be situational. It will be specific to some sort of knowledge, some sort of expertise, some sort of specialization because you have a role and a certain responsibility. It will not be centralized power, where I can determine what he's going to do. The general pattern that emerges is what Lalou calls self-management. So people take care of their own management. It doesn't mean that you don't have management positions anymore. It's just that the way management is done is distributed and is more flexible in the organization compared to a hierarchy where you do have this org chart and your position determines who needs to report to you, etc. Wholeness is an important other part. You mentioned that. In a teal organization, we invite people to fully show up. That was your first table conversation when you came in. We don't expect only the rational, male, judgmental part of you to arrive. We invite everything, which is more and more important in my point of view when we want innovation to happen, we want creativity to happen, we need diversity, we need all of the ideas. We need to be able to deal with ambiguity in ways that use it instead of endure it or dampen it. Otherwise, we can't solve the complex problems, right? The Amber and Orange organizations are focused on solutions to problems that we know. The Teal organization is optimized for solving problems we don't yet know, or for holding up space for new things to emerge. Is somebody of you familiar with Theory U? Sharma has this quote, and I think it's a book title as well, leading from the future as it emerges. That's another phrase for what Lalou says about listening to the emergent purpose of the organization. Somebody mentioned earlier that a teal organization is like a living organism, in contrast to family or the orange model of a machine. And an organism somehow has its own intention, which we can inquire into, we can listen to, we can't simply write down. So it's similar from a corporate vision that we might have in a green organization or in an orange organization. The overall model with this rough path, don't misinterpret this as a ladder with distinct separate steps. Right? As I said, there's a huge complex model of options that organizations can have, and these are patterns that are very prominent and discernible within this complexity. These are the attractors that are in the book. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, so are there any people who are aware or familiar with spiral dynamics? Any spiral dynamics people up here? So spiral dynamics has a more complex model. You'll probably recognize this is like a compact, truncated version. So it turns out I'm really dumb. I can't handle more than like 4 things, right? There are 4 things here, right? Because more than that probably wouldn't work. So this model is like a compressed model, which is actually much more useful. It's much more useful to have a clear discussion of like, oh, well, here's how it works. Here's the model. It also is very useful because in the book, he goes through 10 examples of organizations that operate at a teal level, that operate at from the teal paradigm, right? And there are other organizations that you probably know, and that other organizations that I know that also operate from this paradigm once it's been identified. So it's a data-based model, right? So even though it's an abstraction, it's a very useful abstraction. So for years I've been using the Schneider culture model as a way to have great dialogues around culture. I actually switched to my clients to start using this, and it's been very, very helpful because this is a much more directional model. It says, well, where are we today, and what future do we wish for ourselves? What kind of organization do we want to be? And allows that sort of directionality.
Yeah. And a side note, if you're familiar with spiral dynamics and have not read this book, this is yellow spiral dynamics. For some reason, they have different colors in these.
Very cool. So this is the part we have 2 linear talks back to back, and then we're going to go into another exercise. Let's start with, we're going to go through 2 different parts of appeal. One is the people side of it, and one is the organizational side of it. And after each one, we'll do a short exercise. So the people side of it, we want to talk about what are the underlying principles that tell us where we're in the spectrum, right? If you view this as some sort of spectrum from, this level of consciousness, this higher level of consciousness, this, developing this level of consciousness, all the way to the, this very, very high level of consciousness where we treat people fully as adults, right? As we move through the shift in consciousness. What are some of the characteristics that we look at that gives the signals to where is our organization functioning? So on the people side, we have things like this, trust. Are we at trust no one, or are we at this full level of trust? Here we see this person rock climbing, and this person here is fully trusting the other person with their life, right? And so I'm asking you to start introspecting on what is going on in your organizations or the organizations that you work with. What is the level of trust? What is going on with safety? Are people like fully feeling safe, secure? They can say whatever they need to say. They can suggest whatever they need to suggest to the organization to fulfill its purpose? Or are they living in fear? Are they afraid? Are they just getting told no a lot? Openness level. This is kind of business as usual in orange organizations, keep calm and cover your ass. Whereas the alternative of vulnerability, it means that people can fully show up as who they are. Vulnerability is such an important, powerful thing. Vulnerability means I'm the leader, and I don't know what we should do around this problem. We need to figure this out. Help. Can everyone help work together to figure this out? I don't have all the answers. That's vulnerability. Vulnerability is the newest person in your company putting their hand saying, I don't know how to do this. Can someone help me? Right? It is crucial for high-performing organizations that people feel the safety where they can actually be vulnerable and say the things that they need to say. Connection level. What's actually happening in the fabric between people in your organization? Are people in a place of authentic connection where they feel connected, valued as a whole human being, or are they feeling alone and isolated? And finally, the one we started with, wholeness. Often in the modern workplace, it's a dehumanizing place where somebody actually caring about you, somebody actually asking caring questions may feel like psychology, like you're in a psychologist's office, because it's so unusual, right? Versus the other end of the spectrum, which is the whole person. Mind, body, heart, and spirit. Welcoming in the person exactly as they are. And having that person feel fully seen and valued as the human being they are. Full of flaws, imperfections, and so on. Right? So this is the spectrum. So we're going to do an exercise now. Everyone has a handout or if you don't have a handout, there are more handouts at the back, or you can also share with your neighbor. And my invitation is to take a pen and mark where is your organization right now on this line? Where is it? Is it, you know, in the middle? Is it right? Take some time to identify where your organization is, and then in small groups, I'd like you to debrief and discuss how this relates to organizational performance.
absolutely amazing how the energy in this room gets higher and higher with each exercise. Continue in a very similar fashion about the organization. So, power and leadership in the organization you work in, spend most of your time in, feel at home in. How much of that is centralized or distributed? Information access. Is it rather restricted, only shared on a need-to-know base, or is it transparent? So unless it's legally impossible, you can access every information in the organization.
So for example, transparent means in some teal organizations, they have transparent salaries, so everyone knows what everyone else's salary is, right?
Or they set their own salary. Or
yes, or they even set their own salary. That's a different story.
And they have the information they need to make that in a sensible way. Planning and control. Do we believe that we can predict the future and control that it happens the way we predicted it? Or do we believe that the future is emergent and that we can shape the context for something beneficial to happen?
Yeah, so one really obvious example is budgets. You know, we say we're an agile organization, but we have an annual budgeting process, right? Which is very unagile. A lot of, if we're really that way, then we might have some sort of emergent budgeting process, like beyond budgeting or, some sort of distribution of authority.
Or do you believe that you can be agile or not agile? Or do you believe that agile is a spectrum and a beautiful landscape of things that can happen?
Well done, sir.
Martin Kearns said at the last Agile conference that every time somebody says this is not agile, a fairy dies. But it's very, very personally important to me that we don't forget that. Performance and compensation, right? Are you paid by humor or no? Centralized or distributed? Right? Who decides about compensation and who decides how to measure performance and these things?
So, for example, in one teal organization, the way salary works is that everyone's salary is known, and everyone writes a letter open to everyone in the company saying, oh, this is what I've done the last year, this is what I plan to do, and therefore on this basis I think I should get this percentage increase in my salary. Right? Everyone can see everyone else's letters, it's all out in the open, and what they do is they have one group of people that they think are really good people at evaluating these letters, and people decide who should be on this group, and this group reads all the letters, and they give people advice. They say, well, hey, you asked for this, that seems very reasonable. They say, oh, you asked for this. Compared to everyone else's letters that we're seeing here, that seems a little bit high. We give you some advice, maybe not to ask for 5%, but to ask for 3%. And other people, they say, oh, you've asked for 1%. That's too humble. You should be asking for 3%. We've seen what everyone else has done compared to what you're doing. And they give people advice. And you know the beautiful thing about these teal organizations? It's advice, and people can take the advice or not take the advice. They're fully able to decide on their own. And for those of you in a amber organization or an orange organization, this is mind-blowing.
Yes. Who of you knows of a company named Buffer? They have all of their numbers online in a way that you can understand them. As a customer, you know exactly what you're paying for and how they use your money. And they also have transparent salary, so you can see not who earns what, but how the wage of everybody, how the salary of everybody is determined by location and job and seniority and lots of things. And they have regular discussions about how to structure this and how to make these choices. Okay, similar exercise as the last one. We do have the handout, you know how it works. Same time, and go!
Welcome back. So I want to clarify that teal is sort of like an amorphous blob. It's kind of like, well, it's kind of like this, and we can describe it and talk about it, right? However, there are many, many different ways of being teal. Teal's like about this place of consciousness, this place of treating people as full adults, right? Inviting them to be fully responsible. And I want to go through and clarify what are some of the key characteristics of a teal organization as kind of an illustrative sketch. It's not like this is the teal, and if it's not this, it's not teal. That's not what we're going to do. The main important thing is, you know how we have this organizational hierarchy that's been there since the Catholic Church 2,000 years ago? The main thing is that hierarchy, that org chart, is gone. Those managers, those bosses, they're gone. Right? When Olaf was talking about oppression, the structure, there's an oppression that comes with the hierarchy. There's an oppression that comes with a boss, that leads to paternalist behavior. That is gone. Right? And there are many different ways to replace that. And we're sort of talking in an illustrative form that's typical of teal organizations. So again, it's from the book, Reinvent Organizations. The core thing in a teal organization is evolutionary purpose. People in the organization are bound by a sense of why they're there together. For example, I was hearing talk by a guy from Airbnb said their purpose is to bring people from the world, across the world together. Right? That is the core purpose of what they do. And it touches everything in how they approach all the work they do. Right? And then we see all these teams. These are meant to be teams. They're people on the teams, and they have relationships with people in teams. And these teams have these messy, spaghetti-like relationships, depending on who they need to work with and talk with. And depending on what kind of organization it is, there may be very different structures and very different sort of relationships between people, between teams, and so on.
The important thing to say at that thing, when you look at the model, the examples in the book, they're extremely different. So one example is the company Morningstar, tomato processing company in California, producing, I'm not sure, 70% of America's ketchup or something. This is an industry organization, but it's a factory. So they have very, very optimized, engineered process, very clear roles, very clear responsibilities, exact plans, right? Because they don't want to throw half the tomatoes away because somebody was, I don't know, making some agile planning or something. And then there are organizations like Birdsong, which is a nursing organization in Holland, in the Netherlands, and they have about 1,000 teams of nurses that do neighborhood care in Netherlands, in Dutch neighborhoods. And they are self-managing companies, so to say, right? So there would be a team of like 10 nurses, and they do everything they need to do their job. They have, for a few thousand people, they have less than 20 people in a central office. I don't actually know what they do, because these nurses do everything. These nurses do everything by themselves, but that's everybody working in that organization can control the whole value chain, right? In this conference, I can probably use the word value chain, everybody understands it. In the tomato processing plant, nobody understands the whole value chain. Lots of specialists who need to work together, right? The totally different organizations, totally different structure. The principle is that people find out what the right structure is and adapt to it according to the purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you may or may not have teams. The important point is that in, let's say, Birdsong example, there are these independent nursing teams. They have these bare minimum staff functions. Or another thing that shows up are volunteer task forces, where people sign up to take some sort of role where there's a need in the organization to accomplish something. Right? This is very different from traditional organizations today, where we have very large, powerful, centralized functions, IT, you know, HR, and all this stuff. Instead, all this stuff's pushed out to the groups, so everyone takes care of their own stuff. And there's only centralization where it truly makes sense, where the people here on these teams are really saying, oh, we really need this, right? And so that way the power stays with the people that are dealing directly with the customers and directly servicing the needs. There's some things that support the area, the whole structure, which is this responsibility, where everyone says, oh, success depends on me, right? And when everyone understands the success of the organization depends on them, they are invited, they tend to show up very, very differently, right? I think someone here was talking about what happens if I'm fully invited and my purpose is maintained and the other one is accountable to peers, right? If there are no bosses, everyone has to hold each other accountable for what they say they're going to do, right? Which creates a very different and much more powerful social relationship, Once we have bosses, everyone will rely on the boss to deal with all the problems, right, and challenges. On the other side, we have the kind of things that typically show up, like evolving roles or contracts, and these are often very much smaller things, right? So instead of having a role like a project manager, that may be broken up into 10 different micro roles, right? And someone says, oh, I'll do this little micro role, and then the people can trade them off. It's like, oh, I've got a child and a new baby, I can't be as busy, can someone take off these roles, I'll still keep these ones, and so on, right? And this is an evolving negotiating thing, whereas in modern state, roles tend to be very static, right? And this lies in with agile teams where people take on whatever role is appropriate to accomplish the purpose of the organization or purpose of the team or accomplish the objective. The other key piece is this advice process. This is a really, really key part of it, which is that we want to have a mechanism for people to help each other make great decisions. Right? And if there's no one giving instructions, we need some sort of way of doing that. And the advice process is very, very elegant. And how it works is that anybody in the company can do anything. Someone says, oh, I think we need to do this. And their job is to get advice from everyone else. Advice from the people who are impacted by what they want to do, and advice from the people who have knowledge and expertise about what they're trying to do. And they go and they get advice from these people, and they get advice from these people, and they don't have to take any of the advice. Because if they have to take the advice, it's not advice, it's like mandated, right? It's other people telling them what to do, like architecture group or whatever, right? And the reason they don't have to do this stuff is because if other people tell them what to do, they don't own it anymore. They're no longer responsible because somebody else told them what to do. So then they are in charge, they totally own it, they can take the advice or not take the advice. Of course, it's all recorded, so everyone can give them more advice. Like, hey, you weren't taking advice last time, look what happened. Perhaps you should consider taking advice.
And the important thing again here to give examples that are beyond what we think is possible. There was this company called AES, American company running energy plants. And one situation that's described in the book is that somebody had this idea of buying and running a power plant in Kazakhstan. And they had never done any business in Asia before. And he went to the CEO and he asked them, hey, what do you think we should do, etc. And he said, yeah, figure it out. And this is like a multi-million-dollar decision. This is not like I decide which kind of Sharpies I buy, or right? This is everything. Bertolk had this team who wanted to do something that was not nursing, and went to the boss and asked him, hey, do you want to do this? It makes so much sense. And he said, I don't know. I'm not going to make that decision. Do it, and then see if others follow you. And now they do both. In 80% of their teams, not in 100, because in some neighborhoods it doesn't make sense.
But just to finish off, so conflict resolution, there are very specific conflict resolution mechanisms, so that everyone agrees, oh, we have a conflict, this is how we decide it, resolve it. And of course, all this is important. The other part is this whole person, which we talked about, that along with trust, this is like the central thing that holds up the whole system. That if we don't have trust, if we don't invite the whole person in, then it doesn't work. So it's not possible to just take a little piece of teal and say, oh, I'm just going to lay this in my organization, it's going to work. It doesn't work like that. There's a holistic system, sort of like for those who go back to extreme programming. We have all these practices that work really well together. And if you take one piece out, then everything else goes at risk. I'd like to invite anyone who has, we already had this gentleman share, anyone else who has experience with teal organizations to share a little bit about what their experience was. Great, please stand up and share.
Hi, I'm Victor from Brazil. I run a company, it's an outsourced company in Brazil. And when you were talking about transparency, I think it's good to share my example. In my company, basically everything is open. So like the salaries are not enough for you to show to everyone to work with them. So for us, like even how much the owners do make each month, and but what I think is actually most important is we are an outsourced company, so usually we get paid based on hour. The developer who's working on a project, he actually knows how much money the company is making based on his hourly ticket. Besides of that, we usually encourage those teams who are self-organized to participate into business negotiations. So now they're not just developers, they need to talk about contracts and to talk about how do I maintain these projects so the company can grow. So there are more things to discuss on that. I think that would be
great. Thank you so much. Great. Was someone else who has experience with a teal organization? They've been in one. Let's share their experience.
Hey, my name is Beth. I work for an Agile coaching and training organization called Lightspeed, and we are trying to become teal and trying some things out and seeing what works. But I think an example of something that we do that's pretty empowering and self-managing is that we have organized ourselves into tribes, and when we have a profit every quarter, the tribes get a portion of that profit, and then we're told that you guys decide who gets what. So we have a conversation together, usually over beer and food and all that kind of stuff, and we talk about, you should get this, or I think I should get this, and I think that it works because we have trust, and we have, that self-management piece there.
Beautiful, thank you for sharing.
In our organization, we're trying to work towards teal ourselves, and just recently, an experiment we've done is around sunset selling. So we had a situation where other teams wanted to hire some new people, and they decided on a candidate they wanted to bring in. Instead of going through the normal process, which is okay, give the HR and figure out offer and who's going to pay, we said, you guys figure that out. And that led to discussions where then they were transparent about their salaries. They had to talk about, we didn't tell them to do this, but they had to talk about it with each other. And I guess I had a lot of fear about it because I wasn't sure we were actually ready as an organization to go to that level. Yeah. But what astonished me was the level of rigor and attention that everybody put into this. And the teams, these are people like call center work, tech support type stuff. But I mean, they really focused and what they came up with. And so they decided this is what we're going to pay this person coming in. And they looked at their own salaries, and they decided to adjust their own salaries. And the interesting thing was what they asked for when they said that they were going to pay themselves was basically exactly what we were thinking that they should be getting anyway.
Who knew this could work? Right. So this is the big bottleneck, right? So the big barrier is us believing in this actually working. So. I want to go to how do we use this model. So now that we know all this stuff, it's like, oh, this sounds really great. How do we actually go about using this? How do we go about applying this with organizations? So I guess this is like, for me, this is the compelling argument. This is like the compelling reason. I often don't share with clients because it's kind of, maybe not that good because it can be seen as judgmental. But in my mind, the model that I have is that as we increase consciousness and trust, then engagement of people, of workers, right? People show up with fire in their belly because they're invited to their whole purpose, and outcomes of the company, results, right? So it's not about this touchy-feely thing of making people happy or this, oh, we want to have happy employees because we want to do that, it feels good. It's about getting results, about helping the organization achieve its purpose. This is not like illustrative, this is just like, well, if you read the results of what these companies are able to do in terms of their business results, it's fantastic. It's unbelievable. Like Semco, I think, has had 20% growth year over year for the last 30 years, the Brazilian company. And so anyway, so this is like kind of the really great argument for how we want to invite people not to become teal, but to increase consciousness and trust, right? You have all these sliders. It doesn't matter which of those sliders you improve. If you improve any of those sliders and increase the consciousness of the organization, the way people are invited to show up as whole adults, then the results will match, right? And no organization is teal everywhere. Organizations tend to be a little bit more teal here, a little more teal there, maybe green there, and stuff like that. So it's not trying to be some perfect, mythical unicorn, right? It's about being very practical about, oh, where are we right now, and where do we want to go? So I'll invite you to check in right now, and you've got 1 minute for this exercise, for checking where are you in your organization right now in terms of this spectrum, right? And maybe you want to use percentages, you're going to circle something that's predominant. Generally, where's your organization, or maybe different areas are different. And then, where do you want your organization to be? Okay, we've got 1 minute, go. So this model is a very useful thing to share with executives, with leadership teams, with people working in organizations. And probably the most important part of this is about giving us something people can't even imagine. Often people can't even imagine a workplace without bosses, right? And the reason is we never experienced it, so of course we can't imagine it, right? So that's probably a great place to start, is to share the model, share the case studies, do a reading group. That's a really great way to have people start imagining what's possible. In terms of how this ties in with Agile, Agile culture is here, right? This is where Agile sits, right? You know, self-organizing teams, it's very teal. People being the central thing. It's totally centrally part of Agile, right? Valuing people, right? Which shows up in green and teal, right? So that's kind of why this is centrally relevant. So in our minds, Agile as an approach, a philosophy is fantastic at the team level. It doesn't help us with organizations. We really want to shift organizations, and this is the work I've been doing and Olaf's been doing for the last several years, is how do we get organizations? How do we get the ground ready? How do we help the organizations change so Agile just lands in, right? When we try to land Agile in here, what happens?
It dies.
It withers and dies again and again. This is a proven experiment. Agile dropped in here will wither and die. That experiment's been done. That's why they're so fantastic that people are using very tactical Agile here, so that they don't try to do this culture shift thing. They don't try to get the Agile mindset, because if we try to do the mindset, it's going to wither and die. Great. Well,
Why do you scale that Agile framework?
Hmm?
That's what it is, a scaled Agile framework.
Some people believe that. I'm one of them.
What's important is this is not a recipe. Right? This is not something you can just take and do, which is because we're talking about a complex world and we can't predict things, etc. We need to experiment and find out. And B, because these are just patterns, right? So even if you find these 12 organizations where Lalou identified these similar structures, doesn't mean that they are the right structures for your organization. So you need to discover and find out. And this is why we also need these people involvement, need to take people seriously so that they can discover together what's possible and meaningful in their organization. What Michael and I have been talking about most of our time in the past 3 to 4 years is how do we consciously improve the way we think about and implement change. And what we're getting to more and more is that we're listening. It's hard to explain how we do that, to what the system wants. Where we don't go in with a preconceived, okay, they need to be faster, the software needs to be better, they need to be more agile, whatever, right? But then we come in and listen and try to identify what is it that the system really wants. Where does the system want to go? Right? And we don't push Agile down people's throats, but instead invite for things that we think could be attractive, and then see who comes, and if nobody comes, then we invite to something else.
Yeah, so I'd add another thing, which is to go back to this slide, that if we're trying to get this is where we're aiming, this is what the voice system says, we're trying to go here, we're trying to go here, the way we approach that change needs the maximum level of consciousness we're trying to go, right? If we use an orange approach and we do a rollout, an Agile rollout, who's been part of an Agile rollout? It's really, you can't really get here. Right, rollout's a mechanical thing. You get here. That's all you get with rollouts, right? So we need to change the consciousness of our approach if we want to get a different result. If the result matches the consciousness of the approach for change.
Yeah. So if you want to inspire people to be free, you can't push them to, right? That doesn't make sense. Freedom of choice, right? Because the thing that I talked about earlier, look at what's really there. Right? This takes a lot of courage. People will be afraid. That's why we will rather be in a I take your hand and we go looking stance, rather than, oh, I know how this works, just follow me. Right? And the other thing is, they need to make the choice. Right? Who's familiar with Christopher Avery's responsibility process? So in most of the situations, in most of the work environments I've been in, people have been in denial, obliged to do something, etc. The responsibility comes with a choice. When I say I want to do this, I want to go this way, or I still remember your advice, pay attention to the people. If the people don't want to go there, it doesn't make sense, right? It needs to be a joint decision.
You should skip this one.
Yeah. So the way we work is we raise awareness, right? Hold people's hands, try to, or dare to look at what's really there, then we can identify options, and then they can make choices. You've probably heard that people don't like to be changed. That's true. They don't mind helping, being helped with raising their awareness. They don't mind help with identifying options. You will want to leave them alone when they make their choices, right? Inviting people to the personal transformation is key to the transformation of the organization. This wholeness requires change in each and every one of us, and as change agents, we go in and change first. And work with the leaders first, right? When I talk to a boss and he says, oh, my developers need to go X, I say, okay, you are in charge of this organization? Yes. So the way this organization works and the fact that it's successful enough to pay my daily rate is due to your leadership. Yes. Okay, so the organization you want, what kind of leadership is that organization going to require? Okay, so what do you want to work on? Right, that's responsibility. And if we have a central authority in the organization now, we're not going to have a distributed authority by telling the boss to go away or by telling the boss to stop managing or whatever, right? He or she will start working and changing, and then maybe the organization will change in a way that people feel invited to step in to power as well.
Yeah,
so starting with yourself, that's the key for us and for the people we want to inspire to change.
And this is the place where, when I'm talking to executives, they find it very difficult because we've gone from saying, well, I want to install Agile and make people and make them better, to, oh, you mean to get what I want, to get to this healthy organization that's living and adaptable and very resilient, I have to change how I'm showing up. That's where it starts to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And then they have a choice. And of course, we want to give them full freedom for the choice. And as change agents in the room, everyone here is here because they're a change agent. This is where you need to start with yourself. For you to invite leaders to come on this transformation journey with you, you need to go first. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years, and it's led to a lot of growth. All right, so we invite you to travel with us to breakthroughs. And it's time for questions. So please, what questions people have or shares?
Thanks. In a public company,
stand up, please.
Yeah. In a public company, shareholder, I'm going to say, where you've got assets of the organization, how do you make broad investment decisions using the teal model that you have?
I think that's a question that hasn't been answered yet.
No,
go.
Perfect. AES is an example of a 40,000 person public company that went public while they were a teal organization. When they were during the process of filing all their SEC filings, SEC said that most organizations have 5% insiders. The way you're structured, you have 40,000, and they decided to go public with 40,000 insiders. They made major investment decisions in Pakistan, for example, over $200 million that were made by an individual who had no management responsibility, no reports, nothing like that, by consulting using the advice process with the CEO on the board and other affected parties and people with expertise. It's worked. There are examples of it. It isn't widely known, but it's something that's worked.
I actually have another answer, is that for teal to work, there has to be a belief and a faith in long term, right? Part of lean concept, a lot of Agile is very focused on long term. If you don't have a focus in the long term, teal will not work, right? You need to have a very supportive board, and there are examples of companies where if you don't have the support of the board and people who own the company who believe in the long term, when you hit turbulence, when you hit problems, the companies hit problems, they're going to want to revert to control. We want to control to make sure and monitor, right? So if that's not in place, it all falls apart. Great, next question.
That's called muscle memory, right?
Yeah.
It's the muscle memory for them when they face problems. So just tell me about that in my company. last year we faced a financial problem. Like, we couldn't have all the projects that we need. And I suppose that in other companies, the first idea would be cutting costs and firing people. We decided actually to share that with everyone in one of those meetings that we have. And basically what comes up from that is that people started to show up for like, oh, I can give a course and then we can like make some money for the next 2-3 months. I can just act with some of my contacts to see if we can get some consultancy going, and with that, actually, when you trust people in that, you show,
Sorry, I know we've gone past time a little bit, so apologies for that. So what we are going to do is just do short closing. I just mentioned some details. So slides are available online. We tweeted them. They're also on SlideShare under my name. As well, business cards. If you want to grab our business cards, they're up here. I have a Catalyst camp that I'm doing for people who want to be able to be in a place where they can help others through this kind of change process. That's coming up this fall/winter, so if you're interested in that, please reach out to me. Olaf?
Yeah, I'm running with another business partner, Leadership Academy, starting in October in Europe. And I'm interested in feedback, and B, if there are many people interested in on this side of the Atlantic, we might run it twice. There's sheets here if you're interested.
Yeah, and finally, if you want to continue the discussion, we'd love to continue this and hear from you. Or we want to give we'll give a minute for anybody who wants to clear the room to clear out, and then we can keep on going with Q&A for anyone who's interested, and then anyone who wants to have a deeper discussion. All right, great, thank you.